You're listening to Beast Over Burden, powered by Barbell Logic.
We're Nikki and Andrew, your personal professional coaches.
We help you take control of your fitness through hard but doable training and nutrition practices that fit your busy life.
Build a stronger, healthier version of yourself with lifelong habits. Hello, fellow Beasts Over Burden. I'm your host, Nikki Sims. With me is Andrew Jackson. Thanks for listening to episode 2 of this series on physical freedom and nutrition. Welcome back. What's up, Andrew?
Howdy, howdy.
Howdy, howdy. So today we're going to talk about a very important step of this process, which is defining what you want. Just a small topic, just a small ask. But it's so important because this is really going to dictate your path. And it's going to come up again and again as you're encountering struggles through, developing physical freedom, especially as it pertains to nutrition. So when we talk about defining what you want, what do you think that target needs to look like, Andrew? Or what are the steps that you think are helpful to start to get a vision of what that state could be?
I think the hardest part about defining what you want is to be careful with thinking about the time domain of what you want, because when you hear somebody say, I get to do whatever I want, or I'm just going to do whatever I want, that's, I think, in most people's minds associated with doing what they want in the moment as if there's no consequence, almost being reckless.
Yeah.
But I think doing what you want can be intentional if you change the time domain. So
you almost have to be in two places at once. Like, do I want this right now because it's what I want in the future?
Exactly. And that, that's another concept. We talk often about atomic habits, but James Clear will say that one way to change your habits is to bring benefits from the future, because often doing something in the moment that benefits you in the long run, you don't recognize the good feels until the future, and vice versa. Bring the pain into the future, it's a mental exercise because you're having to imagine this future state or to imagine this future pain and change the time domain. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. A concrete example for me might be that I'm trying to think about how to frame it in a positive sense. But right now, a real big priority is that I don't want to feel bloated and full all the time, because
you lovingly called it a gummy bear.
I feel, when I look at myself in the mirror, I feel like I've achieved gummy bear status, where it's just one keg of belly and very squishy. And, it's because I've been enjoying 4+ maybe arguably 6 months of
gummy bear life.
Eating and drinking without much constraint. And, the caloric momentum has carried me into the gummy bear stage. Anyways, I really enjoyed feeling those things and doing those things. And that's what I wanted to do for the last 6 months, but I no longer want to do that. And so now I'm having to make decisions in the moment that are different than I've been doing for the last 6 months. I'm having to change my behavior. And a lot of what I'm having to do is when I hit those moments where I want to do the thing that I had been doing, I have to reframe the decision with clarity about what it is that I want. So in the moment, I might think I want a beer, but that's not really what I want in an hour, 2 hours, 6 weeks. What I want is to lean out, and I don't want to feel bloated anymore. I'm done with the gummy bear stage, ready to get back to sort of my normal fluctuating weight. But the only way that I'm able to do that is by kind of catching those moments where I'm making a decision about what I want and reframing it in a different time domain. So it's like, I might want the beer in that moment, but what I really want is to feel different in my body, which requires different actions.
It does take patience, because there have to be many days, sometimes many weeks, and depending on how much body fat one's trying to lose, many months and longer. So it takes a lot of patience and getting kind of comfortable with that conversation of You sure this is what you really want? What can we do to make sure this is what you really want right now? Because sometimes you and I know what it feels like on the other side of this. And you brought this up the other day, which I thought was really powerful. What if someone doesn't know what it feels like to lose 20 pounds, to lose 2 inches off of their waist, and doesn't know what it feels like to feel better in their clothing, to sleep better, to feel better in the gym? They don't know what's on the other side of the mountain. All they see is the hill and all the steps they have to take. And it's really tough because it takes time, and you don't get to like fall back on your fun.
Yeah, and there's no direct feedback that your behavior changes you're making are directly related to progress towards that goal. I mean, the only reason I feel confident about it is that I've done it before. When I've dropped from 280 to 240, this is what it was like. These were the behaviors that I did. I'm going back to, we'll talk about it in the future, but I'm going back to the baseline habits that got me where I want to go. And so I have confidence and experience having done it. I did have that moment of clarity or moment of empathy where I can remember feeling hungry or doing something where, for the last 6 months, whether it was watching a football game or just unwinding at the end of the day or sitting down for going out to a restaurant or, going skiing, and you take a lunch break next to the fire and a beer is the thing that I would typically start with. But at the same time, my body's feeling in that uncomfortable gummy bear state. I'm wanting these things. But, if I hadn't gone through this before, I would have sort of been taking a leap of faith that these seemingly innocuous choices, like, is one beer really going to make a difference? Well, arguably, probably not, but it will help move me in the right direction. And so it's been useful for me to reframe when I'm facing that choice, to reframe it as, what is it that I really want here? What I want is to feel good in my body again, which I equate with not feeling bloated and, being leaner than I am right now. And that's been helpful in a tactical moment where that incremental choice will move me closer to feeling better. And it does. And so now I'm starting to accumulate wins, what I would consider wins, by making that tactical choice, getting through that. It's interesting. It's a very short-lived amount of time where I feel
Yeah.
like the beer sounds like a good idea. I think I just mentioned it the other day. It's pretty rare that like 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 hours later, I'm like, man, I'm really glad I had that beer, or 2 beers or 3 beers. Like, there's other stuff around it that I enjoy, but it's pretty rare that I'm pointing
That was the
directly to
reason
the
for all of
beer
my
and being
joy.
like, man,
Yeah.
that was really the thing. Usually it goes along with having fun with other people or being somewhere or whatever, unwinding or relaxing. And so if I can just kind of anchor the decision in what I really want, which again takes time of making these decisions, and I can get through that initial kind of habitual urge or desire to have whatever the thing is. And for me, it's predominantly alcohol, but it could be dessert as
Snacking.
well,
Yeah.
or anything that's really calorically high, snacking, so if I can get through that initial phase, then I very quickly get to feeling the way that I want, that I really want.
Very quickly. How long are we talking?
So for me, a small example, tactical thing that I've been doing is I'll feel like, man, a beer sounds really good right now. But I've been saying, you know what? I'm going to eat first. I'm going to eat my meal and then see how I feel. And usually what happens, by the time I finish eating, I feel satiated and moving towards full, or at least I'm more full than before, especially now that I've been doing this for about a week. Like, I'm actually starting to feel hungry for the first time in months. And so I'll go from feeling hungry to not hungry. And like, if I were to pour a big bubbly beer on top of it, I'd feel bloated and gross.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, the decision faced with the beer is, no, I actually don't want the beer. I just needed like 10 minutes to get from wanting the beer to not wanting the beer, even in the moment, because I prioritized a choice that definitely moves me closer to my goal first, waited just a little bit, and then the thing that I quote unquote thought that I wanted, I don't even actually want.
Something cool I'm picking up on here is by paying attention to how you feel all the time, you're able to articulate things that you don't want to feel, which might help you become more clear on, your vision, what you want. I don't want to feel this way in these pants. I don't want to have compromised sleep. I don't want to look this way. And sometimes when you're trying to decide what you do want, you don't know what that feels like. So maybe the best place to start is to pay attention or start to learn what you like and don't like, and then say, you know what, I don't want that. And that's something that you can work from.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do have concrete metrics that I'm aiming towards, but those sometimes feel abstract when you're just like, I do know what a 37-inch waist and 235 pounds feels like, but it can feel abstract when you're in the moment of choosing what to do.
And for someone who doesn't know,
Right.
yeah, like if someone says, I want to have a 6-pack, I want to weigh this amount.
Right.
Well, is it that? Or is there something about those two things, those two very specific things that you want to feel differently? Or do you even know what it's like to live life with a consistently visible 6-pack? Do you know if you even want that? But sometimes we just know, I don't want to have a 35-inch waist and work from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah. Or I don't want to feel, like I said, bloated and full all the time.
Yeah.
My digestion's always wrecked. Like had a lot of good times over the last 6 months, but I've also had a lot of not fun times. Processing the good times. I'm ready to take a break from that.
Ready for some freedom.
Yeah. Well, and we started off in this series is all about physical freedom, and I think that's an important part of being clear on what you want, because on the flip side of making decisions based on what you want, for many people feeling like, oh, I don't get to do thing 1 or 2. Like for me, I've made the decision that the easiest thing for me to do, like clockwork, it takes all thinking out of it. I tracked my macros for about a week, and it's like, without beer and wine, my natural tendency, my baseline that I've built over the years gets me where I need to be with protein. And I have like a 500 to 1,000 calorie margin to my sustaining caloric needs. I don't really need to pay attention to that much level of detail if I eliminate beer and alcohol in terms of cut. Now, as I get closer, as my weight goes down, I'm going to start being hungrier more often. My energy needs are going to go up, and I'm not going to have as much body fat to pull from. So it's going to get more and more important that I'm going to have less margin of error, I should say. But for me, easiest thing is just to cut the alcohol out until I hit what I consider sort of like some tipping point metrics.
And then that's the point where you're like, okay, it's okay if I have that additional caloric intake, or
now I'm like in the moderation zone.
Okay.
Yeah, where it's like I'll add back in, but I'll be much more controlled in terms of moderation. Like the big weight loss that I went through, I was still having 3 to 4 drinks a week.
Measured. So it was still under control.
I was weighing and measuring. Yep. And I was tracking my macros. So I was, that does, I would say, eat into my margin for error quite a bit. Strategy for me is to eliminate alcohol, which some people might get all like mopey or whatever, or just feel like they're having to restrict. But it does not feel like a restriction. That's just not what I want. Like going through that, just pause through the meal. I've done this now probably half a dozen times. Or just eat. And it's not even what I want. Like I am enjoying sleep so much right now. And I'm enjoying not feeling bloated and full all the time so much right now that I don't actually even, and actually the desire to drink is going down the longer I go without it is really interesting.
So if they have the desire to change and move closer to physical freedom, what are ways that we could define what that might look like in terms of behavior around having physical freedom with nutrition?
Well, I think a lot of it is, like you already said, paying attention to how you feel and notice how existing behavior connects to how you feel, which can be harder. The alcohol one is pretty dang easy in some senses, because especially with beer, it's like so much volume. So that example I'm giving is kind of an easy one. It's like low hanging fruit. If you're drinking hard alcohol, maybe it's a little bit harder, but you're probably feeling it on your sleep or your energy level. Same with wine. Maybe it's, not quite as visceral. I don't know. Maybe some people eat a gallon of ice cream and feel great afterwards. but something is prompting people to change. If somebody's going to want to work on their nutrition, something is not feeling the way, or might be looking the way that they want it to be, and excluding some sort of body dysmorphia or eating disorder scenarios, which are outside the scope of this conversation. There should be something that you can pay attention to and notice that when, at least in my personal opinion and experience, the behaviors that support what I want feel good. I think that's an important distinction that I've learned over my entire life. I mean, I've been trying to manipulate my body weight for 30 plus years in some form or another. And the most liberating thing with respect to physical freedom is realizing the things that feel best, the nutritional behaviors specifically that feel best, are the ones that actually support my goals, my physical goals.
Yeah.
They support my training best. They support my body composition best. They support my energy level best. They support my sleep best. It's crazy. It's like, who would have thought? Oh my God. The things that feel
Why
good.
do I do this all the time?
Are the things you should do.
Well, because you start acting in alignment with what you have clarity on as to what is important. So when you know what's important to you and you start acting in a way that supports that, I think that really removes like an underlying stress where you're not constantly pushing your own boundaries, constantly feeling out of control, constantly just like acting on whims. Now you really have like a purpose, and the things that you do support that purpose. And that gives you like an energy to it. Like you start feeling good about the little decisions instead of having all of the weight on this end goal.
Well, I would even add to it, though, that I'm talking about times when I was micromanaging and white knuckling the hell out of my nutrition, doing things because I thought I needed to that didn't feel good. Whether it was excessive amount of whey protein powder or just excessive amount of calories because I thought I needed to, drink a gallon of milk a day, or excessive amount of caloric restriction because I needed to count every almond that I ate on my zone diet. I think it's both energizing, like you were describing, because you're acting essentially effectively in integrity with what you actually value, but you're also, like, without going down the rabbit hole of telling people exactly what to eat. And, we've had plenty of episodes, and we'll probably talk more about, like, specifically and concretely how much protein to eat, how many calories to eat, how to determine your energy balance. But at a very, very high level, or doing what supports my training and my lifestyle and my body composition goals, feels good, period. And again, I'm excluding a whole list of very challenging and real scenarios. If somebody's out there listening to this with some sort of clinical condition that needs medical attention, or, outside of just eating whole foods and getting enough protein and eating good macros, yeah, those conditions exist. But for the average person, eating foods that support your training and your lifestyle and feel good are probably what you need. You don't have to suffer or like force feed or force restrict or do these crazy things.
You don't have to take an ice bath, snort creatine, and get into an infrared sauna and like fast.
Well, I mean, you've had some experiences like this recently, right? Where it's like you've like for years, you hear all these things that you need to be doing this, don't doing this. And then all of a sudden now, like, you're getting like actual validation from research that things that feel good to do are actually exactly what you need to be doing. And the things that don't feel good are probably not great things for you to be doing.
Yeah, like the examples are eat enough to feel good when you train. Okay, yes, please. Eat a good amount of protein. Okay, great. Like, I'm on it. Lift heavy. Okay, sounds good. And it is definitely validating to know, like, okay, well, those are the right things to be doing.
Do things that make you warm and don't force yourself to
Yep.
be super cold.
Yeah.
Like if you,
What a
to all the
relief.
people out there that love your ice baths and that makes you feel good, great. But like, you don't love being super cold.
I'm not a fan.
You like being super warm.
Yeah.
Turns out sauna's really good for you. Ice baths,
Don't need them.
questionable.
Yep. So I think as a guide, it's actually in this case okay to let feelings drive you forward, because that's going to be something that you have to learn how to use well. It's still like a tool that I think you have to hone. But imagine what it can feel like to not be bloated, to not be disrupted during your sleep, to not have stomach problems, to not have the roll on your stomach when you sit down. Like, those are all feels. They're not super objective, and objective things can come from them. But when you're first starting to create this new sense of, existing in yourself, I think that's really important, because physical freedom is having choice and knowing that you can create changes in ways that feel like something you want to be on board with, not something that someone is telling you you need to do it because you should. It's very different.
Two problems with this that I encounter and I experience personally. One is I did not know what it felt like to feel good. And I think many people don't.
Yeah.
And have never gone through a process of, I mean, it's almost on the scale, a time scale of, strength training. We need to be talking on the order of years. Like, for me to get to the point where I know when I eat these things, I feel good, and I know what feeling good feels like. And I can tell the difference between feeling good and not feeling good. And I can tell what choices I'm making lead me into one direction or the other, was years. And it was a gradual process during which I was kind of doing like the equivalent of an NLP, where I'm weighing and measuring. I'm not paying attention necessarily to how I feel. I'm just trying to hit the numbers. And then I get into a little bit more structured eating, where I was being consistent enough with the food that I was eating. And I was moving towards more whole foods enough that I could notice, when I eat these more whole foods and less processed foods with the same macros, I feel different, and I actually feel better, and my digestion's better, my sleep is better, my energy level's better. And then like building out that palette of food to the point where I could make more choices in more scenarios and maintain feeling good. And then notice, when that comes back, when thing X comes in, I stop feeling good. And again, there's other variables that come in, whether it's stress or, training or, there's things that come and go that add noise to the signal. But that's where I think a coach, game changing for me. It was working with Jillian, where she kind of walked me through that progression from wax on, wax off, novice linear progression, just weigh and measure your food, which I'd done a million times before, but never with a coach. But measuring the macros with a visual food diary, her giving me suggestions on things I could do to mostly swap out processed foods with whole foods, and then move to more of a structure, again, we'll talk more about it, like a baseline basically of certain macros and foods that I would eat. And then over years, just building out more menu, basically more things that I could make or that I could order or that I could buy that fit that macro baseline for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack. And then being consistent enough to be able to tell when I felt good and when I didn't feel good. Because before, all I knew I was doing, quote unquote, X diet. And I had to do the diet because then that would get me the thing. And I would just put all my faith into that. And it didn't matter how I felt. I could be diarrhea every single day. Energy sucks. Lifting sucks. And I'd be just like, but I'm doing the thing. Did you experience it differently? Maybe you pay more attention to actually how you feel more often than I did.
Like, noticing energy is more prevalent now, and knowing how significant the needs for recovery have become in the last few years. Before, it was all aesthetic driven. Like, I don't want to weigh this. I don't want to look like this. And while that still comes up as a goal of mine, there are also parameters to feeling physically free that have a lot to do with making sure I'm eating enough of the right things to have energy and to recover well. And I don't think that was as noticeable when I was younger doing what I was doing with strength training, but that's something that's different now.
Meaning that you weren't paying attention to it.
I don't think I was, and maybe I didn't need to as much, but yeah, I don't remember as much thinking like, "Oh, I'm not getting enough fuel for training." But now I just like that's really something really important to me. I want to make sure that I'm getting enough fuel to feel good in the gym.
I do think that's a really good point. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you've got way more margin for error.
Yeah.
You can get away with way more.
Big time.
The margin for error gets a lot smaller, which I think is where I would imagine most listeners are getting to. And if you're looking for nutrition advice and coaching strategies, something's probably going on where you've exceeded your margin for error. Otherwise, you're probably happy with wherever you're at. But yeah, absolutely. There was definitely less noise because you have less stuff going on in life in general when you're younger, and you have more margin for error. So the impact of those decisions is not as critical. Plus your ability to synthesize protein, you're more efficient. Generally speaking, have more muscle mass unless you've been a bodybuilder for years or lifting for years. But when you're younger, you tend to have more muscle. So you're burning more energy. Your activity level tends to be higher just because you're out doing more things.
Yeah.
As you get older, the impact of those decisions becomes greater and your ability to recover reduces. And in many cases, your goals have actually gotten bigger too. Like you're trying to do more, you're lifting more, you're working more, you're living more in some ways with fewer resources. So yeah, I think you get more acutely aware. I mean, the classic example going back to drinking is just the hangover situation. Like in your 20s, you can go out on a Friday night and you're ready to go the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like
days,
2-month process to recover from a big night. So yeah, I mean, some of it is just not noticing, but I do think if I were paying attention and being honest, maybe I would know. It's just like the performance difference is way out at the margins. And now it's like you notice when you feel good just trying to get up and go to work in the morning, or whether you feel not good.
Bad. Yeah. So until the next episode, start paying attention to those things, to your energy, to your sleep, to how you feel for lifting. And, you don't have to know what those mean, but just kind of pay attention to it. And next episode, we're going to talk about coming up with a baseline. And this is really important. We're both really excited to talk about this because this is something you're going to come back to frequently.
When you're in a situation where you're asking yourself, what do I really want? Play with the time domain.
Yeah.
What do I really want in this moment versus, well, what do I want in 2 hours or 2 weeks or a year?
Yes.
That, I think, can radically change your perspective on what you really want in the moment.
I love that. Dig it. Awesome. We will see you here on the next one. Thanks, Andrew.
Bye-bye.